What does not change technique and effects in psychoanalysis? Overview. This document reviews the central debate within psychoanalysis regarding the relative importance of technique versus analytic effects. It highlights a historical and ongoing tension, arguing that a rigid focus on predetermined techniques, often seen in contemporary training, overlooks the unpredictable and surprising nature of genuine analytic change, which was central to Freud's and Lacan's understanding of the field. The paper advocates for a shift in focus toward the production of analytic effects, new subjective awareness, and the maintenance of a dynamic discourse as the defining characteristic and primary goal of psychoanalysis. Main themes and key ideas. 1. The core tension, technique versus analytic effects. The fundamental argument presented is that psychoanalysis is not defined by its technique, but by its effects. This contrasts sharply with a prevalent view, particularly in modern psychoanalytic training, which prioritizes the application of a specific, predefined technique. Critique of technique centricity. Many contemporary analytic institutes, according to the author, are overly focused on teaching and adhering to proper technique, often taking for granted what that technique is intended to achieve. This leads to a circular argument where the analysand should get better as a consequence of proper analytic technique, making the reason for analysis increasingly unclear. Freud and Lacan's stance. For Freud and Lacan, technique is secondary to the effects analysis is expected to produce. As Lacan observes, as the objectives of analysis lose their importance, ritual forms of technique become more highly valued. Lacan, 1956/2006b, pages 388 to 389. They were less concerned with adherence to a rigid methodology and more with facilitating a process of subjective change. Analytic effects defined. An analytic effect is characterized by surprise, not symptom relief. It creates a new subjective awareness, a new recognition of something that had formerly seemed foreign, but is now seen as part of oneself, rather than a return to a previous state of health. 2. Psychoanalysis is not aimed at symptom removal or predetermined outcomes. A crucial distinction is drawn between psychoanalysis and other forms of therapy, such as cognitive therapy, which aim at the removal of symptoms within a set number of sessions or a return to a previous state of health. Leader's candidness. Darien Leader's statement that psychoanalysis doesn't aim at the removal of one's symptoms is highlighted as scandalous in their candor within the empirical medical discourse. His assertion that we don't know where we are going to go or how long it will take, we just have to see what emerges, underscores the unpredictable nature of analytic work. Unknown results. Unlike medical procedures with clear, predetermined results, e.g., a coronary bypass, in analytic discourse, the result is unknown. We just have to see what emerges, as Leader told his interviewer. The optimal outcome of analysis is not a given, and therefore, the techniques used are not and cannot be given and are in fact always in play. 3. Freud's ambivalence towards rigid rules and the value of wild interventions. Freud's own actions and writings reveal a complex relationship with established rules and a surprising appreciation for interventions that deviate from proper technique, as long as they generate an effect. Wild Psychoanalysis, 1910. Freud criticized a physician's scandalous recommendation to a patient, which led him to create the IPA for professionalization. However, he then remarkably adds, for as a matter of fact, wild analysts of this kind do more harm to the cause of psychoanalysis than to individual patients. I have often found that a clumsy procedure like this, even if at first it produced an exacerbation of the patient's condition, led to a recovery in the end. Freud, 1910, page 227. This suggests that surprising the patient into a new awareness, linking anxiety to erotic life, can be useful, even if the technique is hand-fisted. Nonsense. Go right ahead. Freud's advice to Bernfeld regarding didactic analysis, nonsense. Go right ahead. You certainly will have difficulties. When you get into trouble, we will see what we can do about it. Further demonstrates his flexible and less dogmatic view on training and technique. Focus on the idiosyncratic. Freud's clinical interest was always on what is said by the analysand, not on achieving a predetermined goal. He emphasized paying close attention to what the patient says about them, referring to hysterical patients' experiences, and how the patient describes it dreams, focusing on the most idiosyncratic parts of the psyche, what is unique to each subject. 4. The Ptolemaic versus Copernican subject, decentering self-awareness. Psychoanalysis aims to disturb the analysand's Ptolemaic view of themselves, where self-awareness is centered on the ego, and to uncover aspects of subjectivity not yet recognized. Surprise and new recognition. Analytic effects are achieved when an analysand's own words and actions return to him, strike him differently from before. This allows for the recognition of the real cause of their anxiety, leading to a different way of thinking about their symptom. Dissentered subject. The subject is, as Laplanche, 1992/1999, describes it, dissentered with respect to his ego, always moving between what he consciously recognizes as himself and the subject that is not, yet, recognized as such, that appears always as a surprise. Critique of objective mastery. The article argues that analysis is not about arriving at an objective mastery, either by the analyst of his technique or by the analysand of his subjectivity. Instead, it is about uncovering something that is normally hidden from all our efforts at mastery, a truth that cannot be reduced to a record of empirical experience, a know-how that had been unthinkable up to that point. 5. The analyst's role. Maintaining the dialectic and responding to the unknown. The analyst's primary responsibility is to keep the dialectic of the analytic process alive, ensuring that the analysand speaks and new associations emerge, rather than rigidly applying a technique. Only one resistance. The resistance of the analyst. Lacan's emphatic statement, there is only one resistance. The resistance of the analyst. Lacan, 1988, page 228, highlights that if the analysand isn't speaking or producing new material, the analyst needs to take action. Creating a dialectic. The author's personal clinical vignette illustrates this, describing how he was forced from the beginning to actively create, never mind maintain, a dialectic with a patient deemed unanalyzable by traditional standards. This involved unconventional interventions that prompted the patient to talk differently. Poetics versus therapeutics. The article suggests thinking of analytic praxis less as a kind of therapeutics and more as a poetics, literally, a making rather than a healing. This implies a focus on creating something new and unexpected, rather than restoring a prior state or applying a reproducible treatment. Charles Olson's projective verse is used as an analogy, emphasizing the importance of the effect of the poem on the reader and the uniqueness of each creation, mirroring the analyst's concern for impact on the analysand and the unique nature of each analysis. 6. Critique of modern training and its consequences. The current emphasis on technique in training programs is seen as problematic, leading to stagnation and a lack of critical perspective among supervisors. Arlo and Mahoney. The paper critiques figures like Arlo and Mahoney, who dismiss Freud's early cases because they don't adhere to a proper technique or a presumed modern psychoanalytic thought and practice. They exemplify a focus on technique over the actual effects or theoretical implications of the work. Arlo, for instance, implies that if everything is done properly, the outcome of an analysis is as good as known in advance, which the author refutes. Inability to address complex cases. The author argues that a training focused solely on technique would be unable to have much effect on a severely obsessive analysand, for whom minimizing the impact of other people, a primary goal of obsessional thought, is made ridiculously simple by the presence of such formalism. Lack of theory of effects. Both the author and his supervisors experienced perplexity when the effects of that technique do not lead to the results we had imagined would follow when we started training, due to a lack of a theory of what to make of this. Conclusion. The article concludes that for psychoanalysis to remain relevant, its clinical training must center on analytic effects and not analytic technique. The essence of psychoanalysis lies in the discovery of something new, marked by surprise and a dynamic, evolving discourse. This requires a willingness to engage with the unknown and unknowable, and to develop new techniques, a new technique for every analysis, perhaps to keep the analytic dialectic alive in the 21st century. The danger of prioritizing a rigid, predetermined technique is that it stifles the possibility of true analytic transformation and alienates the subject from their own unique subjectivity.